After a few months, the news of the battle with the Dali dynasty had spread throughout Emperor Xia's realm. After a few months, the news of the battle with the Dali dynasty had spread throughout Emperor Xia's realm. But no one was able to find out anything else. Just that Emperor Li's realm had made concessions on all of the issues that had caused friction between them and Emperor Xia's realm. They had no other choice, as they no longer had any way to defend against Emperor Xia's realm. Emperor Li did not make any earth-shattering moves. After all, they had suffered grievous losses, but the base of their power was still there. The royal family and all their children were still alive. The only thing he could possibly do was break the rules and attack Emperor Xia's people. And if he did that, he would pay for it with his life. Obviously, Emperor Li was not that desperate yet. Yi Futian was recovering, and Qin Xiangang was shut up for a period of time as well. After all, he had once destroyed his own powers, and his flesh had not yet completely reformed. He naturally needed to cleanse his will and recover to where he had once been. One day, everyone went to pay their respects to Emperor Xia. Although the people who had made names for themselves at the battle with the Dali dynasty were Yi Futian and Qin Xiangang, the former imperial advisor, they knew that the one they should be thanking was Emperor Xia. In addition, Yi Futian owed the Peacock Emperor his gratitude as well. Yi Futian and the others reached Emperor Xia's palace and bowed slightly to the emperor. "Your Majesty." Emperor Xia and Queen Xiao were sitting there. Emperor Xia looked at Yi Futian and Qin Xiangang and said, "I trust you are recovering well? The worst part is already over," said Yi Futian with a smile. "No need to trouble yourself over it, Your Majesty. I must thank you for my life as well, Emperor Xia, and the lives of the people of my household," said Qin Xiangang. Emperor Xia had come personally to save the people of the imperial advisor's residence twice. "You should thank Yi Futian. If it were not for him, I would not have acted," said Emperor Xia with a smile. "But although you should not feel like you owe me anything, you should still consider coming to serve my realm. What do you think?" He had said that the imperial advisor did not owe him anything. He hoped that he would serve the realm of his own free will, not because he was returning a favor. Qin Xiangang naturally understood this, and he said, "Your Majesty, perhaps the Crimson Dragon realm would be more suitable for me." Emperor Xia nodded. "Very well. If Emperor Li does anything reckless in the future, you and Yi Futian will be the first people that I turn to. Moreover, Qin Yuan is there as well. With you there taking care of her, I do not need to worry about her." His precious daughter would probably not remain in Emperor Xia's realm. He had seen Qin Shuanggong's power on that day. He had been able to block Emperor Li's will. He knew that he had already come close to the marvelous gate to the Renhuang Plain. And even before, few were a match for him on the Nirvana level. Now his level was truly at its limit. Even in a place like Crimson Dragon Realm, there would be few people at the Nirvana level who would be able to threaten him. He was much stronger than the people that he had secretly sent to guard Xiaqing Yuan. After all, Emperor Xia's realm could not part with such powerful figures. "I will do my best," said Qin Xiangang. "Yi Futian, the people of the 9 great tribes are not needed here. You may take them all with you," said Emperor Xia to Yi Futian. These were people that Yi Futian had conquered in the Crimson Dragon realm, and he had sent them here to help Emperor Xia's realm guard against the Dali dynasty. Now that the Dali dynasty could no longer threaten Emperor Xia's realm, he was letting Yi Futian take them back. Yi Futian nodded. Very well. He knew that this time when he returned to Qinya City, they would replace the ancient imperial city and become the foremost city in Crimson Dragon Realm. There was no doubt about it. This was something that he could not have imagined before he had come here. "There is someone else who would like to see you, Yi Futian," said Emperor Xia. Yi Futian was curious as to who it was. Emperor Xia looked out of the hall and called, "Lu Yu, bring him in." Very soon, Lu Yu brought a man into the hall. He was wearing a black robe, and his aura was very weak. He had obviously been grievously wounded. Moreover, his face was dark, as if he had been poisoned. Yi Futian stared at him. He seemed to be lost in thought. "This is the one who poisoned your friend. His powers have been destroyed. How would you like to deal with him?" Emperor Xia asked Yi Futian. "Let him live or die of his own accord," said Yi Futian. In reality, who already knew who had been behind the whole thing. Now, Emperor Xia seemed to want to settle the whole affair. "Father," came a voice. Xia Kuan walked inside the hall, then knelt to the floor saying, "I have made a mistake." Xia Qingyuan was watching everything calmly. This would all finally be settled. "What do you think, Yi Futian?" Emperor Xia asked Yi Futian. His opinion was obvious. They did not need to say too much about the things that had happened. They remembered them well enough. His Highness has admitted his mistake, and Linger and the others are in good health. "You should be lenient, Your Majesty," said Yi Futian. In reality, this went against what he had originally wanted. If it were up to him, Xia Kuan would be destroyed. However, he had to consider everything that Emperor Xia had done for him, as well as Xia Qingyuan. Today, he and the imperial advisor had come to thank Emperor Xia. To turn around and punish the prince would show that they were not grateful. Of course, the reason he could say this was because, in the end, everyone was still alive and well, and because the imperial advisor was standing there by his side. Otherwise, he would not be nearly so calm. "His crimes were not just against you," said Emperor Xia. "Xia Kuan, from now on, you are stripped of your status as a prince. It will be better for you to prove yourself in the outside world, rather than conspiring behind the scenes." Xia Kuan went pale, but he still bowed and said, "Yes, father." On saying this, he turned and left, not looking at Yi Futian or the others. He knew that starting from today, he would no longer have his status as a prince of Emperor Xia's realm. He was just a saint-level cultivator. He would no longer have cultivation resources. From now on, he would have to rely on only himself. Yi Futian turned and watched Xia Kuan leave. There was nothing wrong with Emperor Xia's justice. Xia Kuan had once tried to help Shaoxing kill him, and he was indeed not the only one who had been affected by this. Xia Rong had nothing to do with this affair. But how should we deal with him for the things he did in the Crimson Dragon realm, and all of their consequences? Emperor Xia asked Yi Futian and Qin Xiangang. Qin Xiangang had been the one to suffer from his actions. Qin Xiangang bowed. "Your Majesty, the prince had his reasons for making the choices that he did, so we cannot speak of right and wrong. I am able to stand here today because of your Majesty's grace. I do not wish to pursue this matter, and neither does Futian." Yi Futian nodded as well. Since his teacher had said this, what else was there for him to say? "Your Majesty, Xia Rong has always wanted to prove himself in battle. Do not blame him too much," pleaded Queen Xiao. After all, Xia Rong was the eldest son of Emperor Xia's beloved one. After Emperor Xia became a Renhuang, he could only take a queen. Later, Emperor Xia had doted upon Xia Qingyuan, and the people of Emperor Xia's realm had all theorized that she would be his heir. This was probably quite troubling for Xia Rong. Emperor Xia nodded. "Fine, then I will deal with him myself." He did not announce to the crowd how he would do so. He sighed inwardly. Xia Rong was not seeing things clearly. His eyes must be opened wider. What use was plotting against the imperial advisor and winning battles against the Dali dynasty? Emperor Li was still there, and so the Dali dynasty was still the same. Those who could truly decide everything were those who stood at the peak of their power. Xia Rong would probably never have a chance to reach that point. But in the future, Yi Futian was destined to take over Emperor Xia's realm and the Dali dynasty. Thus, this whole affair was mostly meaningless. Very well, these matters have all been taken care of. You may all set yourselves at ease and depart. Emperor Xia suddenly smiled. Yi Futian would naturally not stay in Emperor Xia's realm for long. He knew that many people of the realm were discussing whether or not he would be their new ruler in the future. But he knew that Yi Futian did not belong to Emperor Xia's realm. If he truly took charge of the realm in the future, he could only bring it to even higher levels. But this all rested on the assumption that Yi Futian would survive. If he died, then all of this would come to nothing. And Yi Futian's family background was not simple at all. His future would undoubtedly bring great disturbance to the world. Thus, he would not live a pampered lifestyle. He was more suited to struggling and training in life or death situations, cultivating his state of mind, his will, and his authoritativeness. Yi Futian was very smart, and his will was extremely firm. But what was holding his back was that he often cared too much. For example, during the bet at the royal palace of Dali. If he could have been more ruthless, he would not have lost to Emperor Li. This was his weak point, but it was also an advantage. Because this was the way he was, many people flocked to his side. Otherwise, how could the people who had once been of the imperial advisor's residence have appeared by his side? If he had not been the way he was, the imperial advisor of the Dali dynasty would still be the imperial advisor. Yi Futian nodded. For now, things in Emperor Xia's realm were settled, and there was nothing more to worry about. He already had a good base in the Crimson Dragon realm. He had already cultivated in the regional palace, and Qi Shang knew him. He was very famous there as well. It would not be long before he had a chance to leave. When are you preparing to leave? Asked Emperor Xia. In a few days. I'm sure that you hate to part with the princess, and my friends and I would like to go and see the Holy Ji Palace. We will leave when we return, said Yi Futian. Ah! Emperor Xia thought for a moment. When the time comes, I will have some powerful people bring their descendants to the Crimson Dragon realm. You won't need to worry about them. The wider world will have a better stage for them, and let them advance even higher. They will be responsible for their own cultivation. Yi Futian nodded. I understand. In reality, he had never worried about those people. They had seen to their training, and he had never been sure if they were in Qianye City or not. What Emperor Xia had said was exactly correct. Cultivation was his business, and he would help people as much as possible. Very well, you may leave, said Emperor Xia with a wave of his hand. Yi Futian and the others bowed and left with Qin Xiangang. As they exited the hall, Yi Futian let out a sigh and smiled. Teacher brothers, I never thought we'd have a chance, said Yi Futian with a smile. He had thought that he and the others were on different sides, and their relationship as masters and students would only last for a certain period. Are you satisfied? Asked Teacher Nanjai with a smile. No, I envy you all. You have all been lucky to have such an outstanding disciple like me, said Yi Futian with a smile. He walked away from them. Qin Xiangang, Yan Yuan, and the others watched his retreating figure with a smile. This guy was outstanding indeed. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Qingzhou City was in the Eastern Sea region of the Nanda Nation in the 9 states, within the land of 100 nations. Qingzhou City was in the Eastern Sea region of the Nanda Nation in the 9 states, within the land of 100 nations. The island city was as quiet as ever. Although its status within the Nanda Nation was no longer the same as before, it still seemed to exist outside of the world, with very little in the way of excitement. Within the peaceful island city, Qingzhou Lake was still as beautiful as ever. Pleasure boats crisscrossed the surface of the lake without end, especially just as evening was falling, making the scene much more lively. Many of the people of Qingzhou City were gathered here, enjoying the beautiful scenery. 2 figures were playing chess in front of a residence on the lakeside. They sat in the cool breeze very comfortably. People would occasionally steal glances at them, but they were not disturbed. They had grown used to it. Father, you made a bad move there. It looks like you will never be a worthy opponent for Uncle Hua, not even in 10 years. Beside them, there was a beautiful woman who looked like she was about 30 years old. Her smile was bright and simple, and the years seemed to not have left their mark upon her. Haha, I'm getting old. It's getting easier and easier to be careless, said Qin Shui. So if you weren't old, you would be winning? Said the middle-aged man across from him with a smile. It was Hua Fenglu. He had a weathered and worn look to him, but you could still see on his face what kind of a hero he had been when he was young. You are truly ruthless, said Qin Shui with a smile, putting down a piece as he spoke. The game isn't over yet. It's been so many years, and you still haven't gotten used to it, came a laughing voice. Qin Shui turned in confusion and saw a boat coming across Qingzhou Lake. A white-robed youth was in it. He stepped ashore and walked towards them. This man was clothed all in white, and his hair was like silver snow. He seemed to be one with the world around him. It was as if there was nothing unusual at all about him appearing there. He seemed a part of the landscape. Qin Shui stood up and stared in shock at the young man who had just appeared. He was even more obviously an outstanding person now, and he seemed even to be otherworldly. Hua Fenglu looked at him as well. At first he was stunned, but then he smiled. He looked back to the chessboard and moved another piece. Aren't you cultivating far away from here? Why on earth have you come so far? He muttered. I was afraid that you would have carelessly gotten old. Yi Futian walked to his side and squatted. He looked at the chessboard and said, It's been 10 years. Did you not want me to come back? His trip had lasted 10 years. No, said Hua Fenglu. A sour look came over Yi Futian's face. Hua Fenglu was so unfeeling. A couple of days ago, someone was chattering about how that rascal Futian had been gone for 10 years, and how unfilial that was. He asked my brother to go to the Eastern Barren Territory and see what he could find out. Why is this happening today? A figure walked over, holding a cup. The former foremost beauty of the Nandan nation was now marked by the passage of time. She was still beautiful, but she had begun to show wrinkles. Masteress. When Yi Futian saw her, he felt a bit guilty. He had indeed been unfilial. When did that happen? Why don't I remember it? Hua Fenglu repudiated her. Nanda Wenyin came over to look at him. Her eyes were slightly moist. She looked at her son-in-law Yi Futian as her own biological son. Why are you crying, Masteress? Isn't this a happy occasion? Yi Futian said as he took the cup from Nanda Wenyin's hands. I'm back. I am not crying. It's good to see you. You've made me very happy. Nanda Wenyin reached out and lightly touched Yi Futian's face and silver hair. This man was already one of the most talented youths in the 9 states. But in her eyes, he was still just a little boy. You lose, said Qin Shuai with a smile. Hua Fenglu looked at the chessboard. It seemed that his last move had been a fatal mistake. Let's not play anymore. This kid has ruined my mood, and I can't play right, said Hua Fenglu as he messed up the chessboard. Nanda Wenyin smiled brightly. This guy had said that he did not want Yi Futian to come back. But if that was the case, then why had he played so badly? You're right. It's all my fault, said Yi Futian with a smile. Yi Futian gave the cup to Hua Fenglu and said, Have some tea. Hua Fenglu took it, and Yi Futian gave another cup to Qin Shuai. You still look so young and beautiful, sister, said Yi Futian to Qin Yi. Qin Yi looked at him, and he saw that she was smiling brightly as well. Her eyes were wet with tears. He was just like he had been in the past. Other than the fact that his aura was more imposing, it was like he had not changed at all. Knock. Hua Fenglu rapped his knuckles on Yi Futian's head and said, You're acting like your father-in-law doesn't exist. I'm sorry, said Yi Futian with a sour look. Everyone laughed, even Hua Fenglu. Time healed all wounds. Hua Fenglu had made progress over the 10 years, and now Qin Yi was like his daughter. She would often spend time with him and Nanda Wenyin. Let's go to the lakeside. Hua Fenglu stood up and walked towards Qingzhou Lake. Yi Futian walked by his side. The evening was falling, but Qingzhou Lake was becoming more and more lively. There were more boats upon it, and whenever anyone would see Hua Fenglu or Qin Shuai, a look of respect would come over them. But no one disturbed them. Some people paid attention to Yi Futian. They could not help but stare at him. He was so imposing that even if you only got a glance of him, you would never forget him. However, it had been 10 years, and the people at the lake at that moment were young men and women. None of them knew what the appearance of this silver-haired youth meant. After all, 10 years in a small city was a long time. Where are you cultivating nowadays? Hua Fenglu said lightly as they reached the lake. Nanda Wenyin was standing beside him calmly, and Qin Shuai and Qin Yi stood on the other side. The Crimson Dragon Realm. I just returned to Emperor Xia's realm for a time, so I came to see you and the Masteress, said Yi Futian. A realm, huh? Murmured Hua Fenglu. That must be far away. Yi Futian nodded. Very, very far. What level have you cultivated up to? Asked Hua Fenglu. I'm a saint, answered Yi Futian. Hua Fenglu nodded. Saint had once been the highest level that anyone in the 9 states had reached. He understood what it meant for Yi Futian to have reached that level. But when he thought of the statue of Emperor Yi Qing, the saint level must be far away from his goal. You must have gone through so much over the years, Futian. We want to hear all your stories, said Nanda Wenyin softly. All right, then I'll tell you. Yi Futian nodded slightly. And so before he left, he told them everything. He talked about Emperor Xia and Xia Qingyuan, as well as the imperial advisor of the Dali dynasty and the Crimson Dragon realm. The breeze picked up, and fireworks cracked above Qingzhou Lake. They were extremely beautiful. As Yi Futian spoke, the whole group was sitting on the lakeside. Hua Fenglu and the others listened quietly. Yi Futian's voice was the only sound on the wind. Every story seemed to have taken place over an entire lifetime. Even though they had not experienced it themselves, Hua Fenglu and the others still felt the thrill of these experiences. They were scared for Yi Futian sometimes, and happy for him other times. The imperial advisor is worthy of respect. He is even more worthy than I am of being called master, said Hua Fenglu. The masters that I have met at every stage have been the best ones possible. They are all worthy of respect. But you are my first master, and you are my father-in-law, so you must be the best of them, said Yi Futian. I see you haven't lost your skill for sucking up, said Hua Fenglu. Then he thought of something and said, this Princess Qingyuan seems pretty impressive. Yi Futian looked at him in surprise, but Hua Fenglu smiled and said, Emperor Xia would be a good father-in-law as well. Yi Futian saw that smile on Hua Fenglu's face. He knew his teacher was being sincere. He wanted to say something, but he did not open his mouth. He wanted to tell him the news that Jiyu might still be alive, but he was afraid that this faint hope would be extinguished, which would only increase his teacher's sorrow. Thus, in the end, he said nothing. He looked out over Qingzhou Lake. Many pleasure boats appeared before him. A small boat was coming towards them, with many people on it. It was very light. There was a young woman of 18 or 19 on the boat. She was as beautiful as a jade statue, and all the youths around her were looking at her. This woman was the foremost beauty of the city of Qingzhou, Mu Xiyu of the Mu House. She seemed to see all of them, and the boat came over towards them. As it drew near, she saw Yi Futian, with his handsome unblemished face, his imposing manner, and his silver hair. He was clearly full of stories, and his eyes were dazzling. She had had many suitors, and had seen all the heroes of Qingzhou City, but with a single glance at the young man before her, her previously calm heart began to flutter. But she had not come for Yi Futian. She turned her gaze towards Hua Fenglu and bowed slightly. Greetings, sir. Miss Xiyu. Hua Fenglu nodded politely. I request that you take me as your student, even if you only teach me to play chess or music. Please take me as your disciple. Mu Xiyu bowed again, showing the utmost courtesy. Hua Fenglu was a legend in Qingzhou City. 9 years ago, he had looked with favor upon an ordinary youth, who had then left Qingzhou City. He returned a year later, and was already a noble-level cultivator. A special man like this was a treasure. However, after returning, his first act had been to go to Hua Fenglu's residence to pay his respects and give his thanks. The people of the city of Qingzhou looked upon this conversation with approval. Miss Xiyu, I've already told you that I won't take you as a disciple, answered Hua Fenglu. Then might I be your servant? Mu Xiyu was still being polite. Hua Fenglu shook his head. Please leave, Miss Xiyu. A disappointed look came over Xiyu's face. At that moment, Yi Futian spoke up saying, Let's go back, teacher. Hua Fenglu nodded. The whole group of them left. Mu Xiyu was stunned. She looked at Yi Futian, but the silver-haired youth did not so much as glance at her. It seemed that her beauty was not that enticing to him. She looked a little disappointed. He wouldn't take her as a disciple, and why had the silver-haired young man called him teacher? Yi Futian and the others returned to the house. Hua Fenglu said, All right, it's time for you to be going. Teacher, you don't need to be in such a hurry to see me go. Are you so cold-hearted? Yi Futian was almost speechless. I'm old. The masteress and I like our peace and quiet. We don't like people watching us, said Hua Fenglu lightly. Yi Futian had shown his face, and the people of Qingzhou City would soon come around to see him. Yi Futian sighed inwardly. He stopped walking. Hua Fenglu and Nandu Wenin both looked at him. All right, then I'm off. Masteress, said Yi Futian. Nandu Wenin had tears in her eyes, but she still nodded. Yi Futian bowed to them, then waved to General Qin and Qinyi. He turned, and his figure flashed as he shot into the sky, becoming a star. Hua Fenglu looked up at him, watching the rapidly dimming starlight. His eyes were a bit moist as well. He's gone, Soon, that little bit of light had disappeared completely. Nanda Wanine took Huafenglio's hand and looked into his eyes. You're being so open and unrestrained. Why are you crying? It's just the wind. It's irritating my eyes. Huafenglu led Nanda Winnie back into the courtyard. Qin Shui and Qin Yi watched the two of them as they walked away. Even though they were smiling, their eyes seemed a bit wet as well. They turned and left. Back on Qingzhou Lake, Mu Shiyu was sitting dumbfounded in her boat. A middle-aged man was waiting by her side. When he saw the disappointment in her eyes, he said, "Were you refused again? It seems that he really won't take me as his disciple, father," whispered Mu Shiyu. His daughter was also once the most beautiful woman in Qingzhou City. "If you keep going back, he will accept you eventually," said the middle-aged man with a smile. "But there was already a young man there who called him teacher," said Mu Shiyu. "A young man? What young man?" The middle-aged man frowned. "A young man with silver hair. He was incredibly good-looking and had an imposing manner about him. I've never seen such an outstanding young man. He was not the least bit disturbed when he saw me. He did not even spare me a second glance. He is different from other people." Her mind was filled with the image of that young man. For someone like that, even after a single glance, it would be impossible to forget his face. Silver hair, an imposing manner, he called him teacher. The middle-aged man was trembling. Then he turned, and in a shaking voice said, "Quick! Go back to Teacher Hua's place." "What's wrong, father?" This was the first time Mu Shiyu had seen her father like this. His whole body was trembling. His legs seemed like they would not support him. The middle-aged man looked at her and held her face with both hands. "Shiyu," he said, "the silver-haired young man that you saw is probably the legendary king of the 9 states." When Mu Shiyu heard her father's words, it was like she had been struck by lightning. She began to tremble slightly as well. She turned and looked in the direction they had come from. The legends circulating through the city of Qingzhou had seemed so distant, but now it seemed so close. He was the figure from that legend. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Back in the Crimson Dragon realm, everyone had been gone from Qinya City for several months. Back in the Crimson Dragon realm, everyone had been gone from Qinya City for several months. Before they left, Yi Futian had used the sword matrix of the void to attack the ancient imperial city, so that they would not dare to do anything foolish. The 9th servant had indeed not done anything foolish. He did not care about anyone else in Qinya City. His only target was Yi Futian. In the time after Yi Futian and the others had left, the 9th servant had officially left the city. He had sent people to Qinya City, and they had destroyed another sword matrix of the void there. Moreover, he created a spatial matrix in the ancient imperial city. It was a two-way teleportation matrix, and the other side of it was in a residence in Qinya City. At the same time, the 9th servant and the people of the ancient imperial city captured Yi Futian's former subordinates and prevented them from leaving the city to spread the news. He had lost that battle in the past because he had been the first to be injured by the sword matrix of the void. This had profoundly affected his combat ability, giving his opponent a chance to find a way to beat him. Now, Yi Futian and the others had actually dared to leave in such a careless manner. All they had to do was destroy the sword matrix of the void, and once Yi Futian returned, he could teleport to that residence in Qinya City. At that time, if he wanted to go and watch, who could stop him? Otherwise, Yi Futian would never come back. This way, he would take the most vicious vengeance possible for Shinkai's death. Many people in Qinya City were worried about Yi Futian. For example, a man of the Situ family knew that if an enemy like the 9th servant would be so daring as to directly come here, even under the threat of the sword matrix of the void, he must have some tricks up his sleeve. If Yi Futian came back, it would be a disaster. Now the cultivators of the ancient imperial city had conquered Qinya City. No one dared to stop them, nor would they be able to. At that moment, the head of the Situ family, Situ Zhong, asked the man who had come in, "What is the situation outside?" "The ancient imperial city has almost conquered Qinya City. We are being watched, and we can't go out. Otherwise, the 9th servant will probably act against us," said the man. Zhong sighed miserably. What was Yi Futian thinking? Without a great weapon like the sword matrix of the void, how could they deal with someone like Ninth Servant? Unless they had carved defensive sword matrices of the void in other cities before they left, they would have no way to return to Qinya City. But could it be that Yi Futian had no idea what was going on in the city? Once he got back, things would go very badly. How are there so many people from the ancient imperial city here? Asked Zhong. The ancient imperial city was the foremost city besides Crimson Dragon City. But this was because of the Ninth Servant's prestige. In reality, the ancient imperial city did not have a huge population. The Ninth Servant was the symbol of the city. There are also those from Xiang City. They probably have not forgiven us for the death of that Nirvana-level figure, and they want revenge, answered the man. Xiang City again? Zhong frowned. Ever since the Battle of the Crimson River, when Yu Sheng had crushed Xiang Nan of Emperor Xiang's realm, they had always been looking for trouble. And every time they were frustrated, they seemed to be unwilling to give up. It is probably because they are jealous, said Yan walking up. Ever since Yu Sheng defeated Xiang Nan, he has not gone out at all. It has affected his state of mind. Even to this day, he has not become a saint. Afterward, Xiang Zhe had come to participate in the peach banquet. However, with Yi Futian there, he had not managed to gain any benefit from this. He was merely reduced to the role of villain. This must have been hard for Xiang Zhe to bear. This was added to his previous grudge against Yi Futian. He is definitely mixed up in this as well. So Emperor Xiang's realm retreated, and then allied with the ancient imperial city. With their power added to that of a high-level cultivator like Ninth Servant, they are probably feeling confident, said Zhong coldly. At any moment, the people from Xiang City could retreat and go back to Emperor Xiang's realm. Xiang City was just their foothold in the Crimson Dragon realm. They could afford to lose it. What can we do now? Asked Yan. In this situation, there is nothing we can do. We can only hope that our Lord has some plan. Now that he has led all of our cultivators out of the city, he has probably thought about how Ninth Servant would deal with him, and see how he should react, said Zhong. Yan nodded. There was indeed no other way. It was not just them. Everyone in Qinya City knew the situation they were in. The ancient imperial city had completely invaded them. Everyone was worried about Yi Futian and the others. Yi Futian still had an imposing reputation in Qinya City. This man, whose name resonated throughout the Crimson Dragon realm, and Yu Sheng were two of the most powerful figures in the land. They were on the regional king ranking. These legendary figures were from Qinya City, and thus the people of the city felt honored. In a great palace in the ancient imperial city, Ninth Servant had his eyes closed in meditation. At that moment, someone came forward. Ninth Servant opened his eyes and looked at the man. It was the prince of Emperor Xiang's realm, Xiang Zhe. What is happening below the palace? Ninth Servant asked indifferently. There are some matters of cultivation that I wish for you to teach me, said Xiang Zhe. They had sought an alliance with the ancient imperial city, and Ninth Servant had not opposed them. Some of the cultivators of Emperor Xiang's realm were stationed in the ancient imperial city. Once Yi Futian appeared, he would head over directly using the space teleportation matrix. He would kill him in a single blow, not giving him any chance. Fine. The Ninth Servant nodded. Xiang Zhe was taking advantage of his opportunities. He had asked him for guidance on many occasions, but he did not refuse. Xing Kai had been killed, and now all he had left was the little master Xing Chou. It would be advantageous for Xing Chou to make friends with good backgrounds. Ninth Servant gave Xiang Zhe some pointers about his cultivation, after which Xiang Zhe said, Yi Futian and the others have been gone for a long time. They will probably be coming back soon. I am not worried, said Ninth Servant indifferently. Xiang Zhe smiled and nodded. With your great power, there is indeed no need to be worried. As long as no Renhuang-level figures interfere, you will be able to easily kill Yi Futian of Emperor Xia's realm. There is no need for you to wait here. The Ninth Servant did not say anything. He naturally could not leave the Crimson Dragon realm and go find Yi Futian and kill him. If he ran into Emperor Xia somewhere, he would die a horrible death. He was strong, but not as strong as a Renhuang-level figure. Here in the Crimson Dragon realm, he had protective charms. There was almost no one below the Runhuang level who could be a match for him. As they were talking, a bright flash of spatial light shot up into the clouds far away. The ninth servant looked up at it. He suddenly stood up straight and walked out into the air. A figure flashed over towards them incredibly quickly, then bowed and said, "My lord, Yi Futian has returned to Qinya City." When he heard this, a powerful aura bloomed from ninth servant. "Let's go," he said in a loud, clear voice. He stepped through the air as he said this. Many figures from the lord of the ancient imperial city's residence stepped into the air at the same time. Gai Huang was there as well, and the cultivators that Xiang Zhe had brought along. "Let's go," called Xiang Zhe in a clear voice. They were all moving extremely quickly. They had to get to the matrix and activate it before Yi Futian and the others did. In but a moment, the line of people that ninth servant was leading descended upon the matrix. The brilliant spatial light of the great path shone, seeming to cut through the ancient road of space. They all disappeared in a flash. Once Yi Futian and the others reached Qinya City, they felt that something was wrong. "It seems that someone is sending us some information," Wu Yong whispered to Yi Futian. Yi Futian nodded, but his expression did not change. They had left, leaving behind an empty city. How could the ninth servant not have made preparations for this? This was without a doubt a great opportunity. If his teacher were not fully recovered, this would be a problem. But now there was no need to think about anything. If the ninth servant was not going to give up, and was going to attack them directly, then he would have to stay here forever. The group walked towards the city lord's office. All along the way, things seemed to be wrong. At that moment, a voice came up from below them. "Lord Yi, I am a member of the Situ family. Don't go back to the city lord's office." Yi Futian looked down there. There was a figure on the road below them, but he was not looking at them. Suddenly, Yi Futian knew exactly what was going on. But he did not stop walking. Before long, the city lord's office appeared in their field of vision. Before they descended, a blast of powerful aura rose from the direction of the city lord's office. It swept out through the sky, covering them within it. A group of figures appeared there, and among them were the ninth servant, Gai Huang and others. Their auras were mighty, especially the ninth servant's. His will bloomed, covering everything up to the far reach of the sky. Everyone in the area felt a suffocating pressure. Yi Futian swept his gaze over them. Besides the ninth servant and the others from the ancient imperial city, he also saw Xiang Zhe of Emperor Xiang's realm. Moreover, there was cold murderous intent in Xiang Zhe's eyes as he looked at Yi Futian, as well as a sense of mockery. He had really come back like this, dragging the people of the 9 major tribes along with him? But even though they had a few more Nirvana-level cultivators, could any of them stop the ninth servant? Yi Futian had a death wish. The ninth servant stepped through the air, only taking a single step, and yet still reaching Yi Futian. He raised his hand and struck up into the air. When his fist fell, the worldly great path seemed to shatter. The area where Yi Futian was standing seemed like it was about to break. The earth shook as the ninth servant's fist turned into thousands of fists that then slapped down in the blink of an eye. But at that moment, another figure stepped forward from beside Yi Futian. He stretched out his hand, and the light of ancient characters wrapped around him. A divine matrix of the great path appeared in the sky, shielding Yi Futian and the others from the front. The ninth servant's fist slammed into it, and the air shook without stopping. Heaven and earth seemed like they would split. However, the dazzling matrix still shone brightly. Qi Xiangang slammed his fist out again, pushing the divine matrix forward and breaking all of the fists as it shot towards ninth servant. The ninth servant's expression changed. He struck out with both his fists, breaking his opponent's attack. He was sent flying backward. He stared at the figure that had strode forward. His eyes were bright, and his heart was pounding. Who was this man? Gai Huang, the others from the ancient imperial city, and Xiang Zhe all looked shocked as well. How could this be? Such a terrifying figure had suddenly appeared beside Yi Futian. People at the ninth servant's level were not easily found. It was the same in all the realms. They were as difficult to find in Emperor Xiang's realm as they were in Emperor Xia's realm. That is the imperial advisor of Dali dynasty, said a figure behind Xiang Zhe. It was his brother Xiang Nan. He had been there at the Battle of Qinya City, was the imperial advisor on Yi Futian's side now, and he had grown even stronger. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Xiang Nan was not the only one to have realized this. Some of the other people there had been in the battle all those years ago. Xiang Nan was not the only one to have realized this. Some of the other people there had been in the battle all those years ago. In particular, the people of Qinya City had all witnessed it, and they all recognized the imperial advisor of the Dali dynasty. The imperial advisor had once stood in opposition to Yi Futian and the others, but he had not been able to bring himself to kill Yi Futian. Now the two of them were walking together. Moreover, the imperial advisor had been unstoppable in that battle, and had overpowered the ninth servant, forcing him to withdraw. Everyone's hearts beat wildly as they felt the intense tension. How could they be calm in this situation? They could all feel that this battle would not play out like they had imagined it would. Instead, it would go in another direction. What would happen once the imperial advisor and ninth servant started fighting? The people from the Situ clan understood what was going on. This was why he had not chosen to disperse after they had warned him, but had instead continued to face the ninth servant. Without a doubt, the most confused people were the people from Emperor Xiang's realm. The look on the two brothers' faces was marvelous to behold. The reason that they had allied with the ninth servant for this battle was that there was no risk in doing so. If they had a chance to kill Yi Futian without putting themselves in any danger, why would they not do so? Even if the ninth servant were defeated and could not kill Yi Futian, they would still easily be able to escape. And a cultivator of ninth servant's level would probably be able to crush Yi Futian anyway. But now, Xiang Zhe could feel a cold pair of eyes gazing at him. It was Yi Futian. Yi Futian stood there, his deep eyes filled with icy coldness. He had not planned to get entangled with Xiang Zhe and Xiang Nan again. The two of them may have plotted against him, but the two of them had a Runhuang realm to back them up. As long as they did not affect him too much, it would be too much trouble to deal with them. He did not want to create enemies everywhere he went, especially powerful enemies like a Runhuang realm. This would make it very difficult for him to travel around. But he had not counted on his enemies targeting him no matter where he was. This time, they had come here to kill him. Who did not know of the conflict between the ancient imperial city and Qinya City? Xiang Zhe's face fell. Then he looked in another direction, towards where the ninth servant and Qi Xiangang were. The fight between them would decide the outcome of this battle, and would determine the outcome of the struggle between the ancient imperial city and Qinya City. However, Yi Futian did not bother to wait for the outcome of their fight. "Take them all," he said calmly. As he said this, a group of Nirvana-level cultivators stepped forward, including Zhu Kai and others. At that moment, his Nirvana-level cultivators completely outnumbered his opponents. "Your Highness, we must retreat," said a Nirvana-level cultivator of Emperor Xiang's realm. Just as he said this, a fist descended. This was the elder of the Zhong tribe's attack. Now they had no way to escape. They could only honestly submit to Yi Futian. They naturally had to try their hardest to get back into his good graces. Thus, they took a more active stance than Wu Yong. The great battle broke out in an instant. Gai Huang was strong, but several Nirvana-level cultivators targeted him and trapped him. Another fierce battle broke out at the city lord of Qinya City's office. The people of Qinya City were already numb to it. This was not even as bad as things normally got here. Yi Futian stepped forward, and Wu Yong stayed behind him guarding him. Yi Futian could use his skills to fight. Thus, it was most optimal for him to stay near Yi Futian. Xiang Zhe looked frightened as Yi Futian came near him. He tried to flee. "You want to flee even now?" Yi Futian grabbed for him, and space will fell. Xiang Zhe felt like his body had frozen. It was as if he was under an immense amount of pressure. Brilliant light bloomed from him. The divine light seemed to be Runhuang's brilliance. However, the brilliant light did not bloom in time. Yi Futian was already there. The star-plucking handprint reached through the air with a loud whoosh. Xiang Zhe was not strong enough to resist it. He was grabbed easily, and his face instantly turned pale. Crack. A crisp sound rang out. Xiang Zhe cried out in pain as his bones seemed to snap. Yi Futian waved his hand, and the giant handprint slammed into the ground with a bang. Xiang Zhe was smashed into the ground so hard that his body made a dent. He struggled to crawl out of the hole his body had made, but he saw a foot coming down toward him. It forced him back down into the hole with another bang. He spat out a mouthful of blood. A furious look came over his face. Yi Futian was humiliating him this much. Not far away, Xiang Nan's face was as pale as ash. As he watched what was happening to his brother, it was like he was looking at himself. Does Xiang City think that Qinya City is a good target to bully? Yi Futian stepped forward and picked Xiang Zhe up from the ground, holding him by the throat. He lifted him into the air until he was dangling. He pressed down with a tiny bit of pressure, and Xiang Zhe felt like he could not breathe. Xiang Zhe went pale. Do you want to make all of Emperor Xiang's realm your enemy, Yi Futian? He said in a hoarse voice. I don't want that, and so I never sought you out to settle our debts. But even though I don't want to make Emperor Xiang's realm my enemy, you still tried to kill me. You tell me, should I kill you? Yi Futian was filled with cold, murderous intent. His gaze seemed to pierce into Xiang Zhe's eyes. From now on, I won't cause you any more trouble, said Xiang Zhe. Yi Futian smiled bitterly. Could it be that simple? He saw that Xiang Zhe was still watching the other battle. Yi Futian knew that he still had hope for the ninth servant's battle. He hoped that the ninth servant would defeat Yi Futian's teacher. Since you want to watch so much, you can watch. Afterward, we will settle our debts. Yi Futian rotated Xiang Zhe as he held him by the throat, holding him up in the air where he could watch the battle. This kind of humiliation was practically a fate worse than death for Xiang Zhe. Over at the other battle, Qi Xiangang was moving forward, forcing the ninth servant to retreat up into the air. The light of the ancient characters of the Great Path flashed, as they wrapped around everything in the area. A person like the ninth servant would naturally be able to feel how strong Qi Xiangang was. Someone at his level could tell what level his opponent was after only a single exchange of blows. Ninth servant knew that Qi Xiangang was, without a doubt, not at a lower level than him. He had already touched the door to the Runhuang level. He stepped forward, ignoring the distance between them. Billowing wool swept out from him, shaking and shattering the very air. He smashed out with his fist, and the sky trembled and shrieked. His fist seemed like it could cross any distance to kill him. An incomparably bright light flashed, and a character that read strong was created in front of the ninth servant, like a stone of the Great Path. The character was filled with wild fist will. All the ancient characters trembled violently, causing a terrible roar. However, the characters seemed to be one with the worldly Great Path, so they could never break. Whoosh! Another ancient character flashed to life on the ninth servant's other side. It read Earth. Whoosh! 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 These sounds rang out continuously as characters that were filled with the will of the worldly Great Path descended, falling all around ninth servant. They seemed to have sealed off the whole area. Everyone was trembling as they watched the scene unfolding in the air. The ancient characters of the Great Path wrapped around ninth servant and spun, giving off incomparably brilliant radiance. The whole area seemed to be bound up within them, and the ninth servant was trapped within. Someone as strong as the ninth servant, who was on the regional king's ranking, had been trapped in but an instant. No one would have thought that the battle would come to this conclusion. There was someone who could dominate the ninth servant. The ninth servant took a deep breath. He had a solemn look on his face. He knew that he had encountered the greatest opponent he would ever face in his life. After all, as a saint-level figure, he could not fight with Runhuang-level cultivators. And the man before him was the strongest man he had ever faced. He formed seals with both his hands, and his body became misty and hard to see. He turned in place as a bright light shone from him. Soon, everyone saw many figures that looked like the ninth servant appear, seeming to have superhuman powers. The air all around him trembled violently, as if it would shatter under the weight of the will that filled it. Terrible fighting will burst out from his body. A beam of light shot straight up into the clouds, trying to cut through the very heavens. But up in the sky, it was smothered by the rotating characters. Rumble! A terrible aura burst forth, and countless ninth servant figures appeared at the same time, heading out in all different directions. These were not exterior incarnations. Each image seemed to have been formed out of his will. Thousands of figures appeared in every direction, lashing out with their fists at the same time. Bang! 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 Incredibly loud noises rang out, and the ancient characters trembled. In every direction, the countless images seemed to overlap in an instant, and their thousands of fist wills merged, forming a single fist. Overwhelming power exploded from it. The sound of cracking rang out continuously from the wall of ancient characters. It seemed like it would shatter. And that was not all. More images appeared. They seemed to be endless. Before them, the wall of characters was about to be destroyed. Qi Xinggang stepped forward in front of the wall of characters. He reached up as if he was holding up the very heavens. And then, everyone witnessed a scene more shocking than any other. Endless ancient characters were born into the world, and fell continuously into the wall that was about to shatter. A terrible divine light appeared up in the sky. "Leave," said a voice, and the brilliant divine light descended in a straight beam right to where the ninth servant was standing. It seemed like it would pierce right through him. And then, all of the rotating characters shattered, and seemed to turn into endless beams of light that pierced through every one of the countless images of the ninth servant. The whole area was about to be destroyed. Ninth servant stood at the center of the area. Countless beams of light shot toward him. His body swelled, destroying much of the oncoming burst of energy, but the images around him were continuously pierced through and shattered. As the endless divine light fell, yet another beam of light shot towards him. In the next instant, all of the other countless beams of light pierced through his body. The ninth servant was frozen there. He looked up into the sky. At that moment, his life seemed to be flashing before his eyes. "Your Highness, I have failed you. I have not lived up to your trust in me." The ninth servant sighed inwardly. There were tears in the corners of his eyes. He thought of how he had been bullied when he was young. It was only when he received the care and support of His Majesty that he had been able to have a future. At that moment, he was not sad about the fact that he was about to die. His heart only ached because he was about to let down His Majesty, when he had placed so much trust in him. He had tried to help the young master become the emperor with all his heart. But he had never thought that he would meet his end like this. If he had done anything wrong, it was only because the young master had come up against the wrong opponent. Everyone's gaze was fixed on the battle up in the sky. Was this the end? If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Divine light fell, piercing everyone's eyes. Although the battle was taking place high up in the air, everyone in a vast area could feel the strength of the divisive and destructive will. Divine light fell, piercing everyone's eyes. Although the battle was taking place high up in the air, everyone in a vast area could feel the strength of the divisive and destructive will. When they opened their eyes, the ninth servant's figures were no longer in the air. Qi Xinggang was the only one standing there, his plain robes flapping in the wind. However, the radiance of the great path that was around him was beautiful and dazzling. The ninth servant was the city lord of the ancient imperial city, and a cultivator of the regional king's ranking. He was called the most powerful city lord outside of Crimson Dragon City. He had died in battle at Qinya City. He had been slain. Everyone still felt like they were in a dream, like this was not really happening. After all, that was the ninth servant. His name had resonated throughout the Crimson Dragon realm for so many years. He had stood at the peak of the Nirvana level. He would have thought that he would have died. The former imperial advisor of the Dali dynasty was much more powerful than he had been at the Battle of Qinya City all those years ago. He had decisively crushed the ninth servant. He must truly be as powerful as was possible, while still on the Nirvana level. Who below the Runhuang level could be a match for him? There were several other Nirvana level cultivators on the regional kings, ranking in Crimson Dragon City. But would they be able to resist him? Yi Futian looked up at his teacher. Although he was more powerful than he had been in reality, he was no more dazzling. On the contrary, his aura was more restrained now, As if he had dropped all affectations to return to his original simplicity, he stood there in his plain robes. And if he did not release his aura, he would seem just like a common person. His magnificence was all on the inside. This was what it meant to truly change one's state of mind. But his combat ability had increased by leaps and bounds. He naturally understood the ninth servant's power. He had learned of it at the Battle of Qianya City, when he had wounded him with the sword matrix of the void. And yet he had still been able to force his way out and escape. The fact that his teacher was able to trap him and then slay him in combat showed just how powerful he had become. The death of Ninth Servant meant the end of an era for the people who lived outside of Crimson Dragon City. The ancient imperial city, which had once been the most powerful, had fallen. A new king had risen. Qianya City replaced the ancient imperial city as the foremost city besides Crimson Dragon City. But was Yi Futian worthy of being called the most powerful city lord? After all, he may have been the city lord, but he was only a saint of true self. There was a considerable gap between his combat ability and that of many other top figures. But many people thought very highly of him. Even the former imperial advisor of the Dali dynasty. He had left the dynasty to stand by his side and fight for him. Such was his charm. This man had created a legend for himself and was considered by many to be the top talent in all the Crimson Dragon realm. It seemed that his legend had been kicked off by stepping on the back of the ancient imperial city. Would the next era be his? He had slain Xing Kai despite their difference in level. It was said that after he entered the regional king's ranking, no one of the same generation was willing to fight with him anymore. Which of them would be able to withstand him? Perhaps Yu Sheng would, but Yu Sheng would not fight him. Ninth Servant, Gai Huang, who was still fighting, turned pale as ash. It was over. Everything was over. Even someone as powerful as Ninth Servant had died here in Qianya City. He had some regrets. If he had not been so arrogant in the past and intervened, when all those cultivators had besieged Qianya City, to seize Emperor Qua's ruins, to give as a gift to Xing Kai, there would not have been such hostility between the two sides. At that time, he had not considered Qianya City to be worthy of his notice. How could they have ever imagined that the city would one day destroy them? Xiang Zhe and Xiang Nan felt the same way. Their faces were also as pale as ash. It could even be said that they were utterly without hope. Yi Futian was still holding Xiang Zhe up in the air to watch. He witnessed the ninth servant's death with his own eyes. His death destroyed his hopes. The battle was already lost. The victory was Yi Futian's. Who could save him? How could Yi Futian humiliate him this much? It was indeed over. The outcome was decided at the moment of the ninth servant's death. The ancient imperial city no longer could resist at all. They had wanted to launch a single decisive attack. They had tried to eliminate Yi Futian and the others at the moment that they landed, and had not yet had a chance to settle, relying on the ninth servant's power. But now, ninth servant was dead, and their opponents still had Qi Xiangang, who was strong enough to kill the ninth servant. Even if Qi Xiangang did not do anything else, and just watched, they still would have no way to withstand the Nirvana-level cultivators of the 9 major tribes. Moreover, they still had Yin Yuan, Yaya, and Shen Tianzhan. Their formation was so much stronger than theirs. The battle was completely one-sided. Gai Huang tried to flee, but several Nirvana-level cultivators surrounded him, blocking off his avenue of escape. Everyone knew that he was doomed. In the last battle at Qianya City, he had not shown the least bit of grace. How could Yi Futian let him go? Does that put an end to your hopes? Yi Futian asked Xiang Zhe, who he was still holding out. What are your terms? With Yi Futian holding his throat, it was hard for Xiang Zhe to speak, and so his voice was very hoarse. Yi Futian looked at him coldly, though he felt a bit sad. Even now he was still talking about terms? He relaxed his grip, freeing Xiang Zhe. Then he slammed out with his fist, hitting Xiang Zhe in the torso. The sound of snapping bones rang out. He groaned as blood flowed from his mouth. Take him away and imprison him in the city. Lock him up with Xiang Nan, said Yi Futian. Wu Yong walked forward and took Xiang Zhe. Xiang Zhe looked up with great difficulty and saw Yi Futian staring straight forward. He was not even looking at him. Xiang Nan was taken as well. The two brothers felt sadder than they ever had before. Were they going to be imprisoned in Qinya City? What made Xiang Nan even more afraid was that Yi Futian did not even seem to care about whether he lived or died. He had said only one thing: imprison him. The feeling that this gave him was that he was not even worthy of Yi Futian's consideration. The only thing that Yi Futian was concerned about was the Runhuang realm that was backing them up. Or rather, it was only their father that concerned him. Yi Futian had initially wanted for Xiang Zhe to give him a reason to show him mercy. But unfortunately, it seemed that Xiang Zhe did not know his place. He still sought to make a deal and to talk about terms. What terms could Xiang Zhe possibly offer him? And even if they were going to talk about terms, it would be Emperor Xiang who sent people to do the negotiations. It was just like the ancient imperial city had been in the past. Now Qinya City was the foremost city besides Crimson Dragon City. They did not have to worry about other Runhuang level figures. Here, they were nearly without enemies. The reason he did not kill Xiang Zhe and Xiang Nan was not that he valued them. On the contrary, it was because he did not think they were worth killing. What would be the point of killing two useless people, and, in doing so, earning Emperor Xiang's enmity? While they were in the Crimson Dragon realm, Emperor Xiang could not do anything to them. And what if they were able to leave one day? This was bound to happen. It was not a good thing to be remembered by a Runhuang level figure. Of course, just letting them go was not something he could do. So he had chosen to imprison them and let Emperor Xiang send people to negotiate. Before long, the battle had quieted down. The cultivators of the ancient imperial city had been destroyed. Yi Futian swept his gaze over the crowd. He discovered that Xing Kai's brother Xing Chou was not there. At the start, it had been because of Gai Huang and Xing Chou that their enmity had grown so deep. Now, the ninth servant had not brought Xing Chou along with him. Had he feared that this great battle would affect him? After all, Xing Kai was dead, and so the ninth servant would probably not want to put his last young master, Xing Chou, in any danger. Spatial teleportation. Yi Futian smiled mockingly. The ninth servant had ordered people to set up a two-way teleportation matrix between the ancient imperial city and Qinya City. That was really... Yi Futian was almost speechless, but he said, "Let's go to the ancient imperial city." On saying so, he stepped forward, and many cultivators followed him. They headed towards the teleportation matrix. The ancient imperial city is finished, everyone thought as they saw what was going on. It was completely finished. In the ancient imperial city, Xing Chou was standing there calmly. He had been waiting all along for news from the other side. It had been so long, and they had still not come back. The battle must have already broken out. As long as the fighting had started, then Yi Futian must be dead without a doubt. He was staring farther. At that moment, beams of brilliant spatial light flashed, seeming to form an ancient road of space. Xing Chou felt his heart surge with pride, and an excited look came over his face. "Have you returned in triumph?" He stepped forward with a smile, preparing to welcome teacher ninth servant. The light of the great path of space shone, and a group of figures appeared in Xing Chou's field of vision. As soon as he saw clearly who these figures were, he froze. His face went deathly pale as the blood drained from it. His heart pounded in his chest. In a flash, all of his thoughts ceased. How was this possible? How could this be? How could Yi Futian be the one who had come? What had happened to the ninth servant? Yi Futian swept his gaze over him. He stepped out straight towards him, moving extremely quickly. Only then did Xing Chou react. A powerful saint-level aura burst out from him. Crack! A bolt of lightning flashed through the air, and Yi Futian descended right in front of Xing Chou. He pointed at him. The finger that he pointed with seemed to be made of the great path itself. Xing Chou's face was filled with fear. Powerful fighting will surged out from him, but it was pierced through and destroyed by Yi Futian's finger. Snap! Yi Futian placed his finger on Xing Chou's brow, and destructive will surged into his mind, destroying everything. Xing Chou's eyes widened, and he stared fixedly at the figure before him. Was this really how he was going to die? Yi Futian did not say a word. He was simply going to kill him. At that moment, Xing Chou felt incredibly sad, as if he had just realized that he had never been an important figure. Instead, he was someone that Yi Futian could kill with a single finger. Bang! A beam of light shot out of his finger, and into Xing Chao's brow. A terrible killing will shot into his mind, destroying everything there. In a flash, Xing Chao's body fell lifeless to the floor. From start to finish, Yi Futian had not said a word, as if Xing Chou had not even been worth talking to. Young master. The other people in the city lord's office trembled in their hearts. Yi Futian had been able to slay Xing Chou like that? Destroy the powers of the Xing Chou and the ninth servant's trusted aides. Let everyone else go. If they cause any problems in the future, kill them, said Yi Futian coldly. The rest of the people he had brought with him shot through the air, preparing to sweep through the ancient imperial city. In an incredibly short period, the most powerful city besides Crimson Dragon City had fallen to this level. After years of hegemony, they finally had to withdraw from the stage of history. Yi Futian swept his gaze over the once-might ancient imperial city. If they had not acted aggressively towards him, he would not have acted against them. He left everything in the city to be coordinated by the people who had previously done so, and he returned to Qinya City. The matter had finally come to an end. Now there were no more forces that could threaten Qinya City. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. The war between Qinya City and the ancient imperial city was over, and Qinya City was completely victorious. The ninth servant, the city lord of the ancient imperial city, was dead. The war between Qinya City and the ancient imperial city was over, and Qinya City was completely victorious. The ninth servant, the city lord of the ancient imperial city, was dead. It was said that Xing Kai and Xing Chou, the descendants of Emperor Zhan, had been slain by Yi Futian. Emperor Zhan's bloodline had been completely cut off, leading many people to weep ceaselessly. Afterward, Yi Futian named the chief of the Bailey tribe as the city lord, giving him command of the city. Other than Wu Yang's Wu tribe, all the other tribes moved into the city as well, so they were in complete control of the city. However, everyone knew that the ancient imperial city was still a vassal of Qinya City, and the status of the Bailey tribe seemed to have changed entirely. As for Wu Yong, Yi Futian had originally thought to make him the city lord, but he wanted to stay by Yi Futian's side to cultivate, and so he gave up the prized position of city lord. After some time, Emperor Xiang's realm sent envoys. Emperor Xiang had sent them. They brought many cultivation resources as gifts, and they were willing to cede Xiang City and promise that from now on, Emperor Xiang's realm would leave the Crimson Dragon realm. As long as Yi Futian was there, they would not set a foot there. They also promised that they would never seek revenge for this in the future. They were willing to write off this grudge with a single stroke of the pen. Many people sighed inwardly at Emperor Xiang's courage. Although they had suffered great losses in their struggle with Yi Futian, if they continued to pursue this grudge, their losses would further outweigh their gains. First of all, Yi Futian's power within the Crimson Dragon realm was nearly unmatched, and Emperor Xiang's realm could never compete. Secondly, he had Emperor Xia's realm backing him up. And finally, there was his infinite potential for the future. If Emperor Xiang's realm hardened their hearts and continued fighting Yi Futian, then even if they were able to kill him, the price they would have to pay would be far too high. The envoys that Emperor Xiang sent also secured Yi Futian's promise that he would not pursue this matter any further and release Xiang Zhe and Xiang Nan, who had been tortured horribly. He would let them return to Emperor Xiang's realm at any time they pleased. He knew that the two of them would always hate him fiercely, but without Emperor Xiang's support, what trouble could the two princes stir up? Moreover, even though Emperor Xiang was making a promise, the two princes would still be well disciplined. Yi Futian would trust the word of a Runhuang-level cultivator. After all, this was not a matter of life or death. After the people from Emperor Xiang's realm left, there was still the matter of Xiang City. Yi Futian talked about it with his teacher. In the end, Qi Xinggang and the people of his household went there to renovate and reorganize the city. The reason Yi Futian sent his teacher was that he wanted to let him have his own space. There he could fulfill his ideals and continue to teach even more outstanding heroes. And Yi Futian believed with all his heart that the Crimson Dragon realm did not lack for outstanding youths with great potential. As for Qianye City, he was still the city lord. He had top figures like Wu Yong, Shen Tianzhan, and Yaya by his side, and thus no one could threaten him. And he was making preparations to link the three cities via space matrices, so that he could travel between them as he liked. In this way, Qianye City, the ancient imperial city, and Xiang City formed the greatest force in the Crimson Dragon realm. No other cities could threaten them. After this was all worked out, Futian returned to the regional palace, where he locked himself away in cultivation. Now he had cultivated up to the saint of true self level. His next goal was to become unblemished. He was sure that although he had removed many of the obstacles in his mind, it had not all been done through his own power. Most of it had been done with the help of the people beside him. But now, the Crimson Dragon realm was completely stable. As long as he did not offend any Runhuang-level cultivators, no one could threaten him. The days passed, and the 10,027th year of the Divine Prefecture calendar came to an end. A piece of shocking news spread through the Crimson Dragon realm, but thankfully it was good news. Qishang, the prince of the Crimson Dragon realm, was going to officially wed Yu Shifei of the Yu clan. This pair of heroes of the Crimson Dragon realm were going to be together from now on, which made everyone in the realm very happy. Countless women were jealous of Yu Shifei. Not only was she a superior specimen, but she was also able to marry someone who she loved and who loved her. And in addition to that, she was of extremely high status and was eminently talented. Prince Qishang and Yu Shifei of the Yu clan both had wonderful personalities as well. One of them was natural and unrestrained, and the other was gentle and elegant. They had never offended anyone, and naturally, no one would ever offend them. This made them a divine couple in everyone's eyes. They were so perfect that people almost could not even be jealous of them. They were only happy for them. At the end of the year, countless people in the Crimson Dragon realm set out on a journey to the center of the realm, Crimson Dragon City. They wanted to witness this perfect wedding. Many powerful figures also went to pay their respects and to present them with gifts. When the end of the year came, Crimson Dragon City was busier than it had ever been before. Futian and Yu Sheng, who was cultivating in the regional palace, also received invitations to the wedding. They had been sent out in Qishang's name, and they were invited to come to the palace itself. Not many people in the Crimson Dragon realm received such an honor. The vast majority of people would only be able to watch from outside the palace. The 10,028th year of the Divine Prefecture calendar finally arrived. That was the day of Qishang's wedding. There was a sea of people outside the lofty palace. They seemed to be able to see a floating stage in front of the brilliant golden palace. The stage was covered in dragons and phoenixes, giving it a happy and auspicious atmosphere. There were all kinds of people from the Crimson Dragon realm within the observation area in the palace. As they walked up the stairs, they looked up at the high-hanging stage. Faint smiles came over their faces. Futian had brought the others as well. Yu Sheng, who had been cultivating in the regional palace, Xia Qingyuan, Pei Min, and Yin Tianjiao all came together to pay their respects. And they were giving respects on behalf of the Runhuang realms that they represented. Futian, came a voice. He turned and saw a man coming towards him. He smiled when he saw him. The man who was walking towards him was Duan Wuji, who had come from the Eastern Palace to pay his respects. An extraordinarily imposing and elegant woman was beside him. It was his sister, the princess of the Eastern Palace. "Long time no see," called Futian with a smile. "It has indeed been a long time. But with all the great deeds you've been doing, I hear your name all the time," said Duan Wuji with a wide smile. This guy had actually managed to destroy the forces of the ancient imperial city. Xing Kai had been unlucky the day he made an enemy of Futian. "Let me introduce you. This is my sister Luoyu. She is always asking about what kind of man you are. Now that you can see him, what do you think?" said Duan Wuji. Futian looked at Duan Wuji. This guy. The woman beside him could not hide her embarrassment at what Duan Wuji said. She could not help but hit her brother, and her pretty face looked like all the blood had drained from it. How could her brother be like this? It was true that she wanted to see this legendary figure, but when he heard her brother's words, he would not be in any doubt about that fact. Yi Futian smiled and nodded to hear. Princess Luoyu. He was someone who had been in all kinds of intense situations, so this was nothing. Princess Luoyu smiled slightly and bowed. Let's go, the ceremony is about to begin, said Xia Qingyuan coldly from beside him. Her gaze was fixed straight forward. Let's go together. Yi Futian smiled at Duan Wuji. Duan Wuji nodded and grinned at Xia Qingyuan. They walked until they reached the bottom of the observation platform. Everyone who was allowed to come here was someone of high status. And so Yi Futian saw many familiar faces, like Luo Yang, who he had first met at the Peach Banquet, and Jiang Taiyi of the Jiang clan. They watched him coming. Yi Futian had displayed his unparalleled talent at both the Peach Banquet and the Battle of the Crimson River, where he had defeated Xing Kai. Now that he had become a saint of true self, they did not know just how strong he was. But this was not a time for fighting. Soon their gaze shifted. They looked back to the ceremonial stage. Up in the sky, radiant sunlight shone down. A golden rock appeared amidst the sunlight, flying by means of rule power. It flew down and seemed to form a real body for itself. There was a figure standing atop it. It was Qishang. On the other side, a strange phoenix that was the color of ice crystals appeared. A beautiful figure was standing atop of it, wearing a dress of ice phoenix feathers. The golden rock and the ice phoenix circled in the air, gradually coming closer together. The two people riding them clasped hands. Qishang was bathed in divine fire, and Yu Shifei was bathed in snow and ice. When they stepped onto the ceremonial stage, it seemed like the rest of the world had lost its color. The Yu clan cultivators all smiled brightly. They had waited a long time for this day. Dazzling light shone down from the palace as the two figures stepped forward. The Crimson Dragon Emperor and the Crimson Dragon Queen appeared. One of them had a majesty that eclipsed all else, and the other was elegant and poised. She could have been a model for all women everywhere in the world. Greetings, your majesties. Congratulations on the wedding. Someone called out as they bowed. In an instant, countless other voices rang out as well. Greetings, your majesties. Congratulations on the wedding. The sound roared through the palace. Countless people were there to witness the wedding. All the women in the palace were looking at Yu Shifei, like she was the luckiest woman in the world. She's very beautiful, whispered Xia Qingyuan. At that moment, Yu Shifei was indeed blindingly beautiful, and even Xia Qingyuan could not help but express her appreciation. This must have been the happiest time of her life. Her smile was warm enough to melt the world. Her beauty engraved itself on everyone's hearts. All the women in the world could only dream of having a moment like this, of being this beautiful. Would she have a day like that? If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. On the first day of the 10,028th year of the Divine Prefecture calendar, an incomparably magnificent wedding was held in the royal palace of the Crimson Dragon realm. All kinds of famous figures had come, including the Crimson Dragon Emperor and Empress, who had come to personally witness the wedding. On the first day of the 10,028th year of the Divine Prefecture calendar, an incomparably magnificent wedding was held in the royal palace of the Crimson Dragon realm. All kinds of famous figures had come, including the Crimson Dragon Emperor and Empress, who had come to personally witness the wedding. Everyone there was a witness. Yi Futian and the others had been watching quietly from below the stage, up until the point where Qishang and Yu Shifei bowed to each other, then smiled and took each other's hands. Hand in hand, they would live together to a ripe old age. But it would not be easy for the two of them to reach old age. Today, the whole world shares in Qishang and Shifei's happiness. We welcome everyone who has come here to pay their respects to enjoy the feast, said the Crimson Dragon Emperor. His voice resonated throughout the palace. A beam of brilliant light shone, and a divine tree seemed to appear up in the air. The tree swayed, and fire-red fruit fell from it. This fruit comes from the Ganyuan Fusang tree, and contains the essence of flames of the way, that have been gathered over 1,000 years. It belongs to whoever it falls upon, and no one is allowed to fight them for it. said the empress from beside the emperor. The tree covered the sky, and many pieces of fruit fell from it towards those waiting below. Everyone looked up with a look of longing. Eating this fruit would be equivalent to absorbing a powerful burst of flames of the way. But the empress had said they could not fight for it, and so naturally, no one would dare to do so. This was the empress's way of livening things up. Futian and the others were also watching the fruit fall. When he saw the fruit falling towards him, he could not help but reach out for it. But then the piece of fruit fell into a pale white hand. Futian smiled at Xia Qingyuan beside him and said, "It seems like you are very lucky." She looked at him and smiled, which made Futian think she looked beautiful. She smiled so rarely, he did not know what happy thing she was thinking about. All of the people who received one of the pieces of fruit smiled, as they were overcome with joy. Then the banquet started. Many pretty serving maids weaved their way through the crowd, and soon a feast that was both delicious and pleasing to the eyes had been laid out. In addition, all of the food and drink at the banquet was rare and precious. Many people from powerful forces began to present their wedding presents. Futian and the others also gave their present in the name of Qinya City. Although it meant little to Qi Shang, it was still a heartfelt expression of their good intentions. The gift was not important, it was only a tradition. Obviously, those who were able to come to the palace today were all people of high status, and so none of them would give a shabby gift. "Wait, there is one more thing," Qi Shang said suddenly. Everyone looked up at him on the ceremonial platform with a look of surprise. Qi Shang took off his ceremonial robes, and his bright smile was unrestrained. A gasp of surprise came up from the crowd. They all seemed incredibly excited. There was a custom in the Crimson Dragon realm that if the groom was willing to give his ceremonial robes to someone else after the wedding feast, it would bring them sacred blessings. Usually, the groom would only do this for his siblings or good friends. Obviously, Qi Shang meant to do this now. But who was he planning on bestowing this blessing upon? Even the Crimson Dragon Emperor and Empress looked surprised. They clearly had not known that he was going to do this. This was Qi Shang following his own will. On this day, the groom could decide these things for himself. Qi Shang and Yu Shifei walked down from the ceremonial platform towards the crowd. Everyone's eyes were on them. It seemed that Qi Shang was not going to give it to any of his brothers. Then, would he give it to one of the top figures of the Crimson Dragon realm? Who would it be? They all watched as he stopped before a young man. The silver-haired youth still looked dazzling as he stood there among the crowd. His handsome features were no less magnificent than those of Prince Qi Shang. This hero of the Crimson Dragon realm was known as the greatest talent in the realm. Was Qi Shang planning on giving his blessing to him? And indeed, everyone watched as Qi Shang placed his ceremonial robe upon Futian's body. He smiled and said, "I hope that one day I will be able to witness the rise of Qinya City." Yu Shifei smiled at him as well, and took off her ceremonial robe as well. She put it on Xia Qingyuan. Xia Qingyuan did not respond. She just stared at her blankly. Qi Shang and Yu Shifei turned and left, walking naturally and unrestrained. "Good luck." Yu Shifei's voice rang through her mind. Xia Qingyuan watched her retreating figure. She did not know what she had meant by that. At the peach banquet, both Qi Shang and Yu Shifei had known that Xia Qingyuan was experiencing unrequited love. Later, they had found out how things stood between her and Futian, and thus they knew everything. The silver-haired young man and the princess of Emperor Xia's realm would have their own magnificent story. Some of the people of the regional palace were stunned by this, like Pei Min and Duan Wuji, but then they smiled. That was just the way Qi Shang was. He always acted in a carefree manner. Maybe he had not had any particular reason for doing this. It was just his casual nature. However, for the two of them to have received Qi Shang and Yu Shifei's blessing above so many others was truly special, and was making everyone stare at them. "Thank you, Your Highness," said Futian with a smile. That was all he said. Xia Qingyuan looked at Futian beside her, then was silent for a while. The cultivators of the Luo clan, the Jiang clan, and many others were all looking at Futian. This palace lord of Qinya City had swept away all of his opponents, and then not long after had stolen all the glory from the other cultivators of the Crimson Dragon realm. His fame had truly been set when he had fought with Xing Kai and defeated him. Now Qi Shang was clearly watching him. They did not know that at the divine martial road of the Peach Banquet, Qi Shang, and the other people of the palace, had already found out which cultivators were the most powerful. The banquet commenced, and the atmosphere in the hall became much more lively. Read the next chapter on our VIP novel. A figure walked towards the people from the regional palace. It was Jiang Tai. He looked at Yi Futian and Pei Min, then raised his glass in a toast. I've heard that after you broke through to the Saint of True Self level, you have found no opponents of your level at the regional palace. There are many talented people in the regional palace. I do not dare to say that none of them can match me, said Yi Futian modestly. Jiang Tai looked at Pei Min. He had heard that he had beaten all comers. In that case, he probably had no one else left to fight. You are too modest, Lord Yi. If we have a chance, I'd like to come to Qingye City and spar with you, said Jiang Tai politely. Yi Futian nodded his agreement. Of course. Jiang Tai turned and left. Luo Yang was also looking at Yi Futian. He wanted to spar with him as well. It was not that he was jealous of him. It was that he truly wanted to test himself against someone as tough as him. Ever since his defeat at the Peach Banquet, he had wondered what would happen if the two of them fought a battle in which they held back nothing. After toasting his elders, Qi Shang walked over to them. It seems that everyone is itching to test their skills. This group of people had all participated in the Peach Banquet. It seemed that they had all come together, whether by chance or on purpose, no one knew. Please do not blame us, Your Majesty, said Jiang Tai. Of course I understand. As members of the regional king's ranking, you must not have many opponents within the Crimson Dragon realm. There are so few that you can actually have a good fight with, said Qi Shang with a smile. In reality, after he had become a saint, he had found the Crimson Dragon realm to be a little bit boring. Given his status, people who were stronger than him did not dare to fight him. What are you saying, Your Majesty? Luo Yang seemed to realize that Qi Shang was hinting at something. After the ceremony, we will go and settle this. Shifei and I are planning to take a trip to the Heavenly Mandate realm, said Qi Shang. Everyone's hearts beat faster when they heard this. Apparently Qi Shang wanted to train. Before he did that, he would finish this wedding. Once he and Yu Shifei were officially a couple, they could go there hand in hand. The Heavenly Mandate realm, everyone whispered. The name was both strange and familiar. They had naturally heard of it. It was one of the 9 supreme imperial realms. How could they not know of it? The Heavenly Mandate realm was at the head of several hundred Renhuang realms, 10 of which were of particular note. The Crimson Dragon realm was one of them. That was a place where the greatest figures of the 3,000 realms of the Great Path could gather. Heavenly Mandate realm. When Yi Futian heard what Qi Shang had said, his heart beat faster. He looked up into the sky. That peerless empress that Emperor Xia and Xia Qingyuan had told him about was there. He had waited for this day for so long. He had asked Yu Sheng to enter the regional palace to come to this point. Now his name was famed throughout the Crimson Dragon realm. Now he was able to come to the palace itself and get close to Qi Shang. He had finally heard the words Heavenly Mandate realm. Lord Yi, do you want to continue to be a city lord, take up a post in the Crimson Dragon army, or go with us? Asked Qi Shang. If Yi Futian wanted to join the Crimson Dragon army, he could give him an important position. In the future, he could become a powerful figure in the Crimson Dragon army and guard one of the borders of the realm. But Qi Shang hoped that would not be Yi Futian's future. Given the talent that he had displayed, his life would be even more significant than that. That had been his dream all along, to reach higher and higher levels. I want to go with you, said Yi Futian without the slightest bit of hesitation. Beside him, Xia Qingyuan nodded as well. She seemed to be a little bit sad, but she quickly raised her head and smiled indifferently. This day had finally come. Sooner or later, he would know everything. He would know whether or not Hua Jieyu was still alive. She would help him find the truth as soon as possible. She knew that this matter had been pressing upon Yi Futian's heart for so many years. These days, he had been spending all his energy to move in this direction. Excellent. Qi Shang smiled and nodded. He looked at the others and said, "How about you all? The people on the regional king's ranking do not need to say anything. If any of you are willing, you can come with me and see how powerful the cultivators of a supreme imperial realm are." Everyone's hearts were trembling. Many of them nodded immediately. They could not miss a chance like this. They wanted to go and see a higher place. They wanted to see what kind of heroes lived there. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Everyone returned to their homes after that grand wedding was over. Everyone returned to their homes after that grand wedding was over. Many were still steeped in the mood, but some top-notch geniuses were only feeling very restless deep down. It was not due to the wedding itself, but what Qi Shang said. The Grand Matrix in the royal palace of Crimson Dragon Realm would be activated 7 days later, opening up the vast great path of space and paving the way to a supreme imperial realm. Such matrices came with a hefty cost with every activation, and the numbers would have been astronomical. So much so that even the top-notch forces found all over Crimson Dragon Realm would have been unable to afford such an expenditure. It was quite a huge to Crimson Dragon Emperor, who was the overlord of the entire region of realms. As such a matrix was only found within the royal palace, and only important figures would have been allowed passage. No one knew when would the next opportunity to head to a supreme imperial realm have been, if they were missed the upcoming one. Qi Shang had also taken the opportunity to extend his invitation. No one would have wanted to miss such an opportunity, which was why all those top-notch figures were feeling restless, getting ready for that trip happening days later. That place was a supreme imperial realm, which was a main realm of the 3,000 realms of the Great Path, that very type of realm which all of the 3,000 realms revolve around. It was said that the number of top-notch mighty ones found in the 9 supreme imperial realms would have eclipsed the total amount of all mighty ones found in the other 3,000 realms. No one found that notion unbelievable. That was because all the most powerful cultivators found throughout the 3,000 realms were found there. There was a reason why the likes of Crimson Dragon Emperor, who was the lord of the main realm in an entire realm region, were few and far between. When one reached Renhuang Plain, they would have ruled over a realm, like the emperors of Emperor Xia's realm and Emperor Li's realm. Renhuangs who were unable to rule a realm themselves would have submitted to the rule of Crimson Dragon Emperor all the same. There was simply no reason for them to not head to that supreme imperial realm. There would have been more of their peers in that realm, and what they sought after would have been found there as well. As such, those who were at the very pinnacle in all of the 3,000 realms of the Great Path would have either ruled over a realm themselves, or trained in the most powerful of realms, a supreme imperial realm. It could have even been said that those top-notch forces found at Crimson Dragon Realm, forces who had holiness of nirvanas serving as anchors, would have been hardly worth mentioning once reaching Heavenly Mandate Realm. Their background would have been rendered meaningless. As such, despite being top-notch geniuses found in their respective turf, they would have been moved one way or another. But then again, other than being somewhat anxious, what they would have actually felt was more in the area of excitement and anticipation. That was how cultivation was after all. Yi Futian returned to Qianya City, and his state of mind was not all that shaken, behaving as his usual self. That was because to him, that was something that would have happened sooner or later, and he long had the psychological readiness for it. It had always been his goal after all, be it for Jieyu or for unraveling his hidden past. It was destined that he must reach further heights. He gathered everyone around after returning to Qianya City. Qin Xiangang, Yan Yuan, and the others headed to Qianya City from Xiang City. There were also the holiness of nirvanas from the tribes coming all the way from ancient imperial city. All of them gathered at Qianya City. That grand matrix of space's activation allowed all of them to bring their own people for the trip. Yi Futian was thinking about who he would have brought on that very trip. Yu Sheng and Xia Qingyuan were definitely included without a doubt. They were definitely neat around. His elder brother, the Sword Saint Gu Donglu, and the others would have been taken along as well. That department had been easy. The key, however, was the holiness of nirvanas that he would have taken with him. Qianya City was considered firmly established in Crimson Dragon Realm, and no one would have had any ideas about the city without good reasons, but there was still a need for someone to stay behind nonetheless. I'd be bringing Chunyang. Lu Chuan shall head out with you people. Yen Yuan and Nanjai would stay behind in Xiang City to look after Feishue, Qi Xiangang said. He needed to head out to a place like Heavenly Mandate Realm with them. I'd be coming too, father, Feishue said. She wanted to come along as well. No, you can't go to the Supreme Imperial Realm, Qi Xiangang said. There were simply too many mighty ones found in such a realm. All manner of people with peculiar abilities and personalities across the board would have been found there. The risk of taking Feishue along was simply too high. Once the secret with her condition was exposed, Qi Shuangong's status, as a holiness of nirvana, at the pinnacle of his training, would not have been enough to protect her. As such, he did not want Feishue to head out to a place like a supreme imperial realm, until Feishue had grown powerful enough to control the powers in her body at will, even incorporating it into her own powers. But by the time she became able to do so, she would have probably surpassed her father. Feishue was capable of sensing emotions of others. She naturally knew that the imperial advisor would have absolutely forbidden for her to come along. She was understandably exasperated, but she did not say anything else, feeling only somewhat dejected. The planes of Yen Yuan and Nanjai had stabilized and they had exceptional states of mind. Yen Yuan was already a holiness of nirvana, and it would have only been a matter of time before Nanjai reaches such a plane as well. As such, he chose to bring Mu Chunyang and Lu Chuan with him on the pilgrimage, to have a look at Heavenly Mandate Realm with their own eyes. Yen Yuan and Nanjai were left behind to take care of Feishue. Futian, I'll leave the rest of the candidates up to you. Just be mindful of not bringing too many. It is our first time heading out there, and we still haven't got a foothold after all. We would have another chance in the future, and then we shall bring more with us then, Qi Xiangang said to Yi Futian, seemingly reminding him. Yi Futian understood that an overly huge group would have meant difficulty in moving around. Read the next chapter on our VIP novel. Comet was especially so if they were to run into any trouble, and the large size would have only proved to be a hindrance, setting them back. All right, Yi Futian nodded. He naturally understood what Qi Xiangang meant. Big brother, don't leave me behind. Long Linger looked at Yi Futian with a begging look. She had a bad feeling about things. Kids need to stay behind here and train. Yi Futian knocked her head a little, and Long Linger was baffled. Kids? Me? I'm almost an old hag now. Long Linger mumbled in a speechless manner. However, age of cultivators was looked at differently from how it was with common people. Despite her advanced age, she looked young and spiffy nonetheless. She had been making progress throughout the years, but when compared to Yi Futian, she was still rather nothing much. In truth, it was not just her. Everyone was making progress as well. Those are still not yet saints. It is better for you people to not head out this time. Yi Futian continued. Devote your time to train here in Crimson Dragon Realm, and get to Saint Plain as soon as possible. Many looked dejected at Yi Futian's words. No going in this trip before becoming a saint, huh? There were many who had yet to become saints. But then again, Yi Futian had also told them to first train in Crimson Dragon Realm. There were still many places in the realm that they had yet to explore, so they held off going to a Supreme Imperial Realm for now. Everything was to be decided later after making a breakthrough into Saint Plain. They would have only served as baggage otherwise. 7 days were over in the blink of an eye. Mighty ones gathered in Qianya City on that day, to send their city lord and his entourage off. Even Zhuge Mingyue elected to stay behind due to yet becoming a saint. She would have been able to head out in that trip still, as her might as the second sister was still there nonetheless, but she just did not want to be of too much trouble to Yi Futian and the others. It was as her little brother put it, they had to first dedicate themselves to their training, and strive to make it through Saint Plain to catch up. Yi Futian left behind sacred spirit stones and training methods. Even if they were to simply boost their training only with resources, they needed to at least get to the pinnacle below Saint Plain. So long as their states of mind proved to be sound, Getting into Saint Plain would not have been much of a problem. The Saint Plain was a threshold in itself, and one's state of mind was of the utmost importance. Wait for me to come home. Gu Donglu stood before Zhuge Mingyue and said, Relax, I'm not running off with someone else. Take care of our little brother. Zhuge Mingyue smiled and said. Yi Futian felt rather speechless, finding her second sister to still be that tough and unyielding. Second sister, you seriously think I'd need looking after? Yi Futian shrugged and said, Yeah, right. Zhuge Mingyue glared at Yi Futian and said, Why do you think these people are here for? Who among them is not looking after you? Yi Futian felt speechless again and then looked at the ones beside, before saying, Touché, second sister. Good to hear. If Jiyu is still here, you have to bring her back to see me, Zhuge Mingyue said in a solemn manner. She and Hua Jiyu were like actual biological sisters. It was her to picked up Jiyu from the land of 100 nations, and had the younger woman train in the Zhuge clan. Zhuge Mingyue really wanted to see that woman who had the looks of a fairy, who was strong yet delicate at the same time. Yi Futian felt rather sorrowful hearing what his second sister said, and nodded solemnly. He then turned around and walked, saying, Let's go. All of them headed out en masse, waving goodbyes to their loved ones. That trip was truly an expedition. The distance between where they were and their destination would have been a lot further than what was between Emperor Xia's realm and Crimson Dragon realm. The place they were heading to, a supreme imperial realm, would have had mighty ones all over the place. And that place would have been at the very pinnacle of the 3,000 realms. That would have truly been the place where Yi Futian belonged. He would have met the most extraordinary of figures in the 3,000 realms of the Great Path, as well the greatest of the best of geniuses. He would have truly found his match there. And of course, he would have found friends there as well. Many were already at the royal palace when Yi Futian and the others arrived, and people from all corners of the realm had mighty ones among them. Yi Futian saw many familiar faces: Pei Min, Duan Wuji, Yin Tianjiao, Luo Yang, Jiang Tei, and many other legendary figures. All of them would have headed out, and all of them brought many mighty ones with them as well. Qi Shang and Yu Shifei were naturally there as well. They looked like a match made in heaven just by standing together. And that probably had to do with both of them being very much in love with each other. Crimson Dragon Emperor had also sent his people as well, but there were but a handful of them. And they have all definitely been top-notch figures as well. Greetings, Senior, I'm Qi Shang. He nodded after seeing Qi Xiangang, who was by Yi Futian's side. People like Qi Xiangang, who had been able to cut down the ninth servant, was hardly found even in the royal palace. You're too kind, Your Highness, Qi Xiangang answered. The regional palace is getting ready to list you on the regional king rankings, and maybe we might see another Runhuang rise in Crimson Dragon realm. Qi Shang smiled and said. Many people around them were busy getting ready while they talked. An extremely huge grand matrix of space gradually lit up. Countless images brightened and shot to the skies. That grand matrix had many stone pillars around, which increasingly brightened as they were entwined with the images below. A beam of light shooting to the sky appeared at the center of the grand matrix, as if it was cleaving a great path of space. Let's go, everyone, Qi Shang said, and everyone headed to the grand matrix. The dazzling beam of light became increasingly terrifying, swallowing their surroundings, and a strong will of the great path of space shrouded even the extremely huge and vast royal palace. That grand matrix devoured space powers in a frenzy, extending its area of effect outside the royal palace. The world around them rumbled, and as a beam like no other lit up, the intense shock was felt throughout the incredibly vast area. Everyone was able to see a beam of light of space shooting up to the heavens. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. The 9 supreme imperial realms served as the absolute center of the 3,000 realms of the Great Path. The 9 supreme imperial realms served as the absolute center of the 3,000 realms of the Great Path. The Heavenly Mandate realm was one of those 9 realms. There were countless cultivators found among the massive population of Heavenly Mandate realm. Many Renhuangs opened up their own clans and forces, at that realm due specifically to the realm being such a place, establishing their own orthodoxies, and imparting their own ways. There were several supreme forces being a cut above the rest in that realm, positioning themselves at the very peak. They pursued true supremacy and transcendence, which was also the final goal for all Renhuangs. There were too many regions with heavenly mandate realm, and every single region was extremely vast, with populations of cultivators, each reaching hundreds of millions. They were Renhuang-class beings who reigned supreme over all, but there were also many weak cultivators eking out at obscure places. But of course, the bulk of the population was found somewhere in the middle. They struggled in the harsh environment around them as they advance, making their way towards greater heights and accomplishments. The Celestial Swordly clan, the Demon Slayer clan, the Yin clan of Luo City were all such forces. They were all at the very pinnacle in their respective regions, but they still struggled to move to higher heights nonetheless. However, that proved to be an arduous challenge. At that moment, in the sky above the Buzhou Ridge, mighty ones from the three major forces stood against one another around a mountain. Sword will permeated the sky above that ancient peak, as if countless divine swords were circling in the heavens. A group of people somewhere was seen wearing ancient swords on their backs, with their sword aura sweeping the vast area. Their might, which originated from the Great Path, was incredibly fearsome. In another corner, there was a group of people wearing golden attire. Their might of the Great Path shrouded the entire area as their auras burst, as if golden rings were fired, clashing with the sword auras in an invisible manner in the air. In yet another corner, a group of people of extraordinary aura had their brimming will shrouded their surroundings, bursting with their own power just like the other two. The three forces almost seemed that they were at even odds with one another. All of them wanted that peak for themselves, or precisely put, a piece of the cut cliff. That cliff seemed to contain a huge mural, which somehow also looked like a statue. The brimming will of the Great Path on it seemed to suggest that it was left behind by a Renhuang. It was apparent that all three forces were fighting for that piece of item. We of the Celestial Sword shall have the mural. The leading woman of the Li clan stepped forward at that moment. Her voice was cold, and the will of her sword swept all over the sky as she declared, striking out at the other two persons standing across her. We'll see if you'd be able to take it in the first place. A mighty one from the Demon Slayer clan responded. A loud clang was heard, and her sword will seem to have clashed with the aura bursting from that mighty one. The ones from the Celestial Sword clan were known for their peerless offensive prowess, yet the mighty ones from the Demon Slayer clan practiced very overbearing methods. They were not about to just yield a piece left by a Renhuang to others. There were many inklings or ruins left behind by Renhuangs throughout Heavenly Mandate Realm, and those places were always targets of all manner of forces, and why they fought each other. Those sites or items were used for cultivation purposes, as well as some other uses at times. The mighty ones from the Yun clan did not say anything, yet the auras bursting from them remained just as overbearing, shrouding the place and getting ready for war. However, at that moment, a beam of dazzling light shot from the air, and it fell before any of them were able to react. The beam of light burst through the will of great paths surrounding the area, and blasted onto that peak. The expression of the crowd changed slightly after they reacted to what was happening. Their eyes were all on that beam of light, before hearing a rumble indicating the crumbling of the ridge. When they looked at where that beam of light landed, everyone's faces were ashen, and they looked extremely grim. That wall which all of them was after had ended up crushed. That wall had writings left behind personally by a Renhuang, containing complete will of great path of a Renhuang. However, that piece was not actually some kind of ritual implement or treasure, and as such, was not all that sturdy to begin with. The writings were no more as soon as the wall broke, and that will of great path within dissipated as well. It's gone. The eyes of the ones in the crowd looked fascinating, and their hearts raced. It seemed that everyone was baffled over what happened. All of them were wondering what that beam of light that blasted the wall had been. Someone emerged from the rubble of the crushed wall at that moment. His clothes were ragged and looked rather unkempt. It was only one person. That person seemed to still look dazed. He shook his head for a bit, and his silver hair billowed. He then looked up around him and found angry, cold eyes glaring at him. That silver-haired figure was none other than Yi Futian, who came from Crimson Dragon Realm. Where are the others? Yi Futian looked around him. None of the others were around. He recalled when they traversed the space. He seemed to remember hazily a very powerful being who happened to pass by, intending to intercept that great path of space flying through the air. Despite that being having been too slow to actually do so, that being nonetheless cut up the great path of space that was just about to open up, severing their path. And then what just happened. Is this heavenly mandate realm? Yi Futian muttered to himself. He had no idea if he reached his intended destination. That being would have probably been a Runhuang-class mighty one. They would not have been able to intercept such a great path of space otherwise. They had definitely ran into a super being when they traversed space, who wanted to intercept them and find out who they were. That being was unable to do so, for the energies that sent them there, contained with the grand matrix of space, was extremely frightening. But then again, Yi Futian realized that he did not seem to have the time to figure out where he was. His top priority at that moment was to stay alive. Those eyes that were glaring at him seemed to be saying that they wanted to kill him where he stood. After he steadied himself, he cupped his hands and said to the crowd of the three forces, "Some issues happen with the teleportation. I'm very sorry to cause all of you trouble." He was about to leave after saying so. Yet, he sensed towering sword wool zipping past his body as soon as he moved his legs. That sword wool was extremely sharp and terrifying. Killing intent of the sword shrouded him. The howling current of the sword above seemed to be able to kill him right where he stood, forcing him to stay where he was. Those people all sported very powerful auras. There were some who were actually unblemished saints, and it was apparent that there were many of them. "You think you could just leave like that?" A mighty one from the Demon Slayer clan asked with a cold expression. The leader looked imposing as his eyes glared at Yi Futian below. He then turned to the other two forces and continued, "Seems like we've gotten all riled up for nothing. How do you suppose we deal with this?" The one who talked turned his attention at the leader of the Celestial Swordly clan, who was a beautiful woman wore simple attire. Her form-fitting garb was clean and without frills, making her look dashing as sword wool coiled around her. Her eyes were cold as she glared at Yi Futian. "You have any Runhuang treasures with you?" the woman asked coldly. Yi Futian frowned and answered, "No, I don't." He naturally denied right away at that moment. If he were to hesitate, those people would have had second thoughts about him. "Hand over all valuables you have on you. If any one of them was worth the Runhuang's item, you get to live." Li Rishuang's voice was cold as she continued, "Otherwise, kill yourself right here, right now." She had been very fixated on that thing left over by a Runhuang. That item was ended up destroyed by Yi Futian. What was done was done. What is the point of killing him? He is but an unlucky which had gotten thrown around by a teleportation attempt. Just let him leave. An elder from the Yin clan of Luo City. There was no point crying over spilled milk after all. If even such a teleportation had gone haywired, he knew that Yi Futian could not have been someone from some noteworthy force, and there was no point backing him to a corner. It was better to just spare him. "You're very generous indeed, Elder Yin. But who shall be responsible for that broken Runhuang relic?" Li Rishuang continued to say with a bone-chilling tone. The way she looked at it, that piece which ended up destroyed had belonged to her. The destruction of that item would have affected her future plans considerably. "So what if you kill him?" Elder Yin then continued. "You have superb talents, Li Rishuang, and you're a one with rare potential among the celestial sword practitioners. Too bad that your state of mind is too brutal and cold, and you're too fixated with the way of the sword." "You're the one to talk," Li Rishuang responded coldly. Her eyes did not look at Elder Yin, making as if the elder was not worth her time. Mighty ones at her side stepped out and walked towards Yi Futian as soon as she spoke. Cold sword wool shrouded Yi Futian's body, seeping with intense killing intent. It was apparent that they were being serious, and they truly wanted Yi Futian to pay for their loss with his life. Yi Futian's frowned hard. While it was true that he was to be partially blamed for the incident, he did not do so intentionally, and it was all an accident. He had no control over anything back then. From the way the conversation was carried between those people, he realized that he seemed to have destroyed a mural left by a Renhuang. While I do not have a Renhuang treasure, I would make it up to you to the best of my ability. Yi Futian looked at that woman and said. Li Rishwang was unmoved. Her eyes remained cold as she said, take everything in his storage ring. Li Rishwang, I suppose we of the Demon Slayer clan should have a cut as well. The mighty one from the Demon Slayer clan said. Some of his mighty ones stepped out and walked towards Yi Futian as well. They looked emotionless. There was not a hint of compassion in their eyes as they looked at him, only uncaring coldness. Yi Futian sensed that he was being enveloped by killing intent, and did not say anything more. He unleashed his aura, sensing the will of the great path around him. A saint of true self? Those who sensed Yi Futian's aura looked rather puzzled. Yi Futian looked rather young, and they somehow were unable to get why he was already at such a plane. An elder from the Celestial Sword clan, who too was a saint of true self, stepped out and his sword will was towering, seemingly having turned into a sword himself. He arrived right before Yi Futian within an instant, and lashed out with his finger. The sword at the tip of his finger flowed, and sword will of the great will washed all over them like a river of the heavens, bursting within an instant, and intending to end Yi Futian right away. Boom! Light of stars coursed all over Yi Futian's body. The starry battle form of his was shining brilliantly. He lifted his arm and pointed a finger as well, clashing with his opponent without flinching at all. You have a death wish then. That elder was cold as he pointed. Countless might of killing swords tore through space as he pointed. At the same time, Yi Futian's finger reached his target as well, the finger of his opponent. Boom, boom, boom. Extremely terrifying wave of entropy seeped right into the finger, breaking it right away. The surge of power ran all the way up the elder's arm and burst into his body. A loud rumble was heard, and then explosions were heard within his body. His back seemed to have been busted by a force. All of his internal organs crumbled in a frenzy. His eyes were frozen right there and then, staring straight at Yi Futian. Yi Futian pulled his finger back, and saw his opponent slowly dropping to the ground. A finger attack was it took to kill his opponent. He had just gotten to the realm, and he had already killed a saint. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. The sword aura dissipated, and a mighty one from the Celestial Swordly clan was killed outright on the spot. Those from all three forces were dumbfounded. The sword aura dissipated, and a mighty one from the Celestial Swordly clan was killed outright on the spot. Those from all three forces were dumbfounded. From their perspective, that person would absolutely not have been someone from some top-notch force, due to having even such errors happening with the teleportation process. Only lone cultivators would have made such mistakes, as grand matrices of space of greater forces would have been stable, and there was no way such errors could have happened. They naturally did not think that the person who just appeared out of nowhere, before them, had actually transcended regions, and happened to have a Renhuang class being interrupting their travel. Furthermore, competition between cultivators at Heavenly Mandate Realm was extremely intense. The fighting was far more brutal than even what was back at Crimson Dragon Realm. That Supreme Imperial Realm was even more vast, and there were even greater number of mighty ones. Even cultivators were practically limitless, and there were few rules binding anyone. They needed to fight over any cultivation resources they were able to find, and more so when it came to items left behind by Renhuangs. Yi Futian broke one such item, and that disrupted all of their plans, which was why the ones from the Celestial Swordly clan and the Demon Slayer clan both wanted to kill Yi Futian and take whatever there was to take from him. However, the attack with that one finger from him clearly indicated that he was anything but weak. He just killed a cultivator from the Celestial Swordly clan who was the same plane with him, and that meant that his attack would have been extremely overwhelming. Li Rishwang's expression remained bone-chilling cold, yet she was rather surprised nonetheless. She thought that taking on such might of the sword head-on would have killed him outright. It was apparent that she had underestimated Yi Futian's powers. Several swordsmen took to the sky, and sword wills howled above Yi Futian's head, as if they were about to rain down on him at any given moment. There was one unblemished saint elder stepped out, and his might was frightening. Yi Futian frowned hard. If that was an unblemished saint, that meant that the upcoming fight would have been tough. It was a given that the elder intended to wipe him out right there and then, but there was no way he would have just sat around waiting to be dealt with. If he were to be backed to a corner, he would have had to unleash the will of Emperor Qua. However, he was nonetheless a newcomer to the realm, and he did not want to do so as soon as he had arrived. The recoil would have been bad as well after all. The halberd of time and space appeared in his hand, and will of the great path pulsed on it, containing intense will of space. The eyes of the people around him flashed. That ritual implement seemed to be very powerful, and it looked as if he still had some treasures with him. Boom! Dazzling flash of the sword of the great path rained down from above in a straight line, targeted right at Yi Futian's body. He disappeared from where he stood within an instant. Two swordsmen charged at the same time at him with their swords drawn, moving at blitzing speeds. Sword auras came at Yi Futian like bolts of lightning. Overwhelming will of the great path emerged from Yi Futian's hand, charging into the boundless sword wills in a straight line, heading for a mighty one. The halberd of time and space lashed out. Raging currents of sword aura coming from everywhere parted in the middle, as they were being destroyed in a frenzy. That swordsman noticed something was afoot, and intended to back away, but felt his will of the great path being blocked. PFFTT. A crisp sound was heard, and Yi Futian, who had been standing far away just moments ago, burst through the current of sword aura right away armed with the halberd, piercing his brow at blinding speed. However, that unblemished saint elder stepped out and charged. Towering flash of the sword rained down as he stepped out, with terrifying hurricanes of the sword whipped up in the sky. Swords rained down one after another. The speeds at which the blades move were unbelievably fast. Yi Futian lifted his hand and lashed out with a palm print. Rumbling explosions were heard. The palm print continued to shatter as his body kept being pushed down. That river of swords washed at him, threatening to bury him in blades completely. A cold snorting noise was heard at that moment. That leading elder of the Yun clan stepped out and came right above Yi Futian, bursting with a terrifying storm of lightning. He lifted his arm, and there seemed to be a god of thunder appearing behind him, extending its hand. Said god's lightning palm print repelled the attacks, and burst with boundless lightning within an instant, blasting on the current of the sword that was raining down. The sky was lit right away, and devastating powers were all destroyed up in the sky. However, countless sword wills in the sky coalesced into one single blade, which was then materialized into a giant sword, pointing at the ground below. Hurricanes of the sword circled around that blade, with boundless sword auras surging into it. That unblemished saint elder stood beside the sword and pointed downward, saying, "Kill." Their surroundings howled in rage as he said so. That giant sword wrapped in hurricanes disappeared right away, cleaving a line downwards. The elder from the Yun clan looked up, and towering might of lightning was coalesced into a single beam within an instant, which then streaked through the sky like a blade. That terrifying lightning bolt seemed to be out to tear the sky apart. Devastating light drowned the sky around them. Mighty ones backed away one after another. That terrifying beam raised the ridge all around them. The sword in the sky, and the lightning then dissipated altogether. The Yun clan elder and Yi Futian both retreated to the side where the Yun clan cultivators were. "Li Ku, you're an old man yourself, and I'm afraid bullying someone a lot younger than you isn't the way to do it." That Yun clan elder looked up at that mighty one from the celestial swordly clan and said. Li Ku's expression was cold, and sword will was seen in his eyes. He then moved forward, burning with intense killing intent. Yi Futian killed two of their saints, and was definitely anything but weak. It could have even been said that he was very powerful, which meant that he needed to be dealt with on the spot. He had no intentions of letting Yi Futian leave alive. However, that elder from Yin clan acted in Yi Futian's defense, which put those from the celestial swordly clan in a difficult spot. But then again, those three forces had always been competing with each other. They were of antagonistic relationship, so it was entirely normal for that elder to act. So your people of the Demon Slayer clan is just going to sit and watch? Li Rushwang said coldly, as she looked at the mighty ones from the Demon Slayer clan. Come to think about it, Yunting was right. That thing was already destroyed, and there was no point killing the kid. We'll just let the matter slide, and have no intentions to pursue the matter further. Excuse us. The mighty ones from the Demon Slayer clan made up their mind on the spot, leaving immediately as soon as that one mighty one finished talking, without staying around for even a second longer. That silver-haired young man who appeared out of nowhere was very powerful, which caused them to re-evaluate their opponent, as well to weigh the pros and cons of cutting him down. Furthermore, the Yun clan stepped in on his behalf, so they saw fit to just give up right away. By the way, they had no score to settle with Yi Futian to begin with, so it was better to just leave and pretend that nothing happened. Arts. Li Rushwang's expression remained cold. Sword will circled about her, as she cast a glance at the mighty ones of Yun clan. She then said, Yun Tung, he killed 2 of ours. Are you sure you are going to cover for him? Indeed. Yun Tung replied coldly. Li Rushwang was superbly talented, and was one of the best to be found in that region. As such, she showed no fear nor respect towards that elder at all. However, it would have been difficult if she were to insist on taking Yi Futian. Sword auras howled in the sky around them, making that space extremely stifling. Li Rushwang glared at the one standing across her. She eventually waved the sleeve of her robe, turning around and saying, Let's go. Her group turned around and left right afterwards. It would have been difficult to kill Yi Futian in such a situation. Yi Futian himself was of formidable powers as well, meaning that it would have been difficult to even just take him on. The only option for the time being was to give up. Yi Futian then cupped his hands and said to Yun Tung, after the ones from the Celestial Swordly clan left, Thank you for saving me, senior. That is nothing. I'm Yun Tung, of the Yun clan of Luo City, the elder smiled and said. He saw Yi Futian mumbling when the young man arrived, looking rather dazed, yet was clearly formidable. All of that piqued the elder's interests. My name is Yi Futian. Yi Futian replied. Elder Yun, is this heavenly mandate realm? Yun Tung's eyes flashed and he looked puzzled. He then stared at Yi Futian with inquisitive eyes. That kid is asking if this is heavenly mandate realm? The elder then continued after that thought. This is indeed heavenly mandate realm. Are you here from other realms? Something wrong with your grand matrix of space? Yi Futian was rather relieved hearing what that elder said. It seemed that he did not end up in the wrong place. He was worried that he was left behind in some other realms. They were probably at the edge of heavenly mandate realm, when some Runhuang-class person happened to see them and intended to intercept them. And that person failed and caused what happened then instead. Indeed. I'm from Crimson Dragon realm around these parts. Yi Futian nodded and answered. While the grand matrix of space had indeed been disrupted, the others should have arrived at heavenly mandate realm nonetheless, and they would not have been all that far away. He was only hoping that they had better luck with things than he did. It was fortunate that he only brought saints with him on that trip. While being at Saint Plain did not mean one would have been considered strong at heavenly mandate realm, it would have at least meant that they were able to stand on their own. Nothing would have happened if they were to not run into any messy troubles. According to what I know, it is rather difficult for other realms of other regions to come to heavenly mandate realm, which is a supreme imperial realm. I could see that you are of considerable powers. So that is how it is then. I assume that you're a descendant of a Runhuang at Crimson Dragon realm? Yunting smiled and said. Yi Futian looked like he was a total mess when he first arrived, with his hair and clothes looking very unkempt. However, after he brushed and straightened himself, it was not difficult to see that he was of extraordinary bearing. I'm not. Yi Futian shook his hand. We're on this pilgrimage to heavenly mandate realm with the prince of Crimson Dragon realm. Something happened with teleportation, and we were all thrown all over the place. The elder nodded and said, So that was what happened. You've just arrived and is separated from your friends. How about we head to the Yun clan of Luo City for a bit? I'd get someone to help you find your friends. and see if they're around these parts. What do you say? Yin Tung continued. People who were capable of traversing realm regions with the prince would have definitely been someone extremely talented, even if they were to not be a descendant of Crimson Dragon Emperor. They would not have had the right to be on such a trip otherwise. Heavenly Mandate Realm was a supreme imperial realm, and powerful people were everywhere. But that did not mean that all of them would have been aloof, arrogant pricks. The Yin clan of Luo City had always intended to become a Runhuang class force. People who came from Runhuang class forces of other realms would have definitely been very exceptional, even when compared to those from Heavenly Mandate Realm. It was just that they were unable to compare to those at the very pinnacle in the realm. Yi Futian stayed silent for a brief moment before nodding and saying, "All right, I'm sorry to have been of trouble to you, senior." He had just gotten to Heavenly Mandate Realm, and he knew next to nothing. He, too, wanted to find out more about the realm, as well as the parts where he actually was. Yin Ting proposed to let him go as soon as he showed, so he assumed that the elder had little to no ulterior motives, and would not have done him any harm. He was getting ready to look for Yu Sheng, Xia Qingyuan, his teacher, his elder brother and the others. "Let's head out then." Yin Ting nodded, and everyone made a move. Yi Futian followed by Yin Tung's side and asked, "Senior, what is that stone wall that I've just destroyed?" "Probably something written by a Runhuang when they stopped by these parts to train. There are many Renhuangs here at Heavenly Mandate Realm. But to us which are not of Renhuang force, anything left behind by Runhuang would have been extremely valuable. And so we came to fight for it, which you just happened to have broken." Yin Tung then elaborated further. "The region that we are in now is where Luo City is, as well as the Celestial Swordly clan, and the Demon Slayer clan you just saw. All of us belong to Emperor Qi's territory. According to what I know, Li Rushuang had intended to take that thing to be brought to Emperor Qi's palace as a gift, so as to earn teachings from the Emperor. Your arrival broke her plans, and that was why she wanted to kill you." Yi Futian nodded, realizing that Renhuangs had their own territories in Heavenly Mandate Realm as well. "If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible." You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.